Here's something most people never question. If a stranger spoke to you the way you speak to yourself, would you keep them in your life? Imagine waking up every morning and someone standing beside your bed saying, "You're not good enough." Look at everyone else. They're doing better than you. You'll never change. Why even try? How long would you tolerate that person? A day? A week? A month? Probably not. Yet millions of people live with that voice every single day, not outside their heads, but inside them. And because it's their own voice, they mistake it for the truth. Let me ask you something nobody ever asks out loud. When was the last time you were genuinely kind to yourself? Not posting a quote about self-love on Instagram, not buying yourself coffee and calling it self-care. I mean genuinely, honestly, treating yourself the way you would treat someone you actually love. If you're struggling to remember, you are not alone. And that gap, that painful gap between how we treat others and how we treat ourselves, has a name in neuroscience. It's called the self-compassion deficit, and it's quietly destroying millions of lives. Today, we go deep. This is not a feel-good motivational video. This is science. This is psychology. This is the kind of research that took decades to uncover, yet most people never hear about. Stay until the end, because the last section completely changes how you see yourself. First, let's destroy a myth. Self-love is not narcissism. Self-love is not arrogance. Self-love is not ignoring your flaws and pretending everything is fine. Dr. Kristin Neff, a researcher at the University of Texas and one of the world's leading experts on self-compassion, defines self-love as three things working together: self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. Self-kindness means treating yourself with warmth instead of harsh judgment. Common humanity means recognizing that suffering and imperfection are part of the shared human experience. Mindfulness means holding your painful thoughts in balanced awareness rather than over-identifying with them. Here's the real kicker. Dr. Neff's research found that people with high self-compassion had lower levels of anxiety, depression, and fear of failure than people with high self-esteem. Read that again. Self-compassion beats self-esteem. Why? Because self-esteem is conditional. It rises and falls based on performance, comparison, and validation. Self-compassion is a stable foundation that doesn't collapse when you fail. Think about this real-life example. Imagine two people who both fail a job interview. Person A has high self-esteem but low self-compassion. They collapse. Their identity is shattered. They spend 3 days spiraling in shame. Person B has high self-compassion. They feel disappointed, yes, but they tell themselves, "This was hard. Failure is part of trying. What can I learn?" Then they move forward. Same external event, completely different internal world. Now let's go inside the brain, because this is where it gets genuinely fascinating. Your brain has a threat detection system called the amygdala. It's been there since humans were running from lions. When you sense danger, whether physical or emotional, the amygdala fires. Cortisol floods your body, your heart rate spikes, your muscles tense. This is the fight or flight response. Here's what nobody tells you. Your amygdala cannot tell the difference between a lion chasing you and your own critical inner voice. When you look in the mirror and say, "You're so stupid, you're not enough, you'll never succeed," your amygdala hears a predator. It dumps cortisol into your bloodstream. Your prefrontal cortex, the rational thinking part of your brain, goes offline. This is why self-criticism doesn't make you better. It literally shuts down the part of your brain you need to think, learn, and grow. Dr. Paul Gilbert has spent more than 30 years studying this through compassion-focused therapy. His research shows that self-compassion activates an entirely different neural system, the mammalian caregiving system. This system releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It releases serotonin, which helps stabilize your mood. your heart rate slows, your nervous system calms, and your prefrontal cortex comes back online. In simple words, when you treat yourself with kindness, your brain opens up. When you attack yourself, your brain closes down. In one study, participants were asked to recall a personal failure. One group criticized themselves the way they normally would. The other group spoke to themselves the way they would speak to a close friend. The self-compassion group showed significantly lower cortisol levels, higher motivation to improve, and greater emotional resilience within just 20 minutes. 20 minutes. The brain responds that fast. But here's the question I want you to sit with. If self-love is scientifically proven to make you more resilient, more motivated, and more mentally healthy, why don't most people practice it? Why does it feel wrong to be kind to yourself? Why does self-compassion feel like weakness? The answer is buried in your childhood, your culture, and a psychological mechanism called the negativity bias. And understanding it changes everything. The human brain evolved over 200,000 years in harsh environments. Survival depended on noticing threats, remembering failures, and avoiding danger. The brain that obsessed over what went wrong survived longer than the brain that celebrated what went right. Dr. Rick Hansen, a neuropsychologist at Berkeley, once said the brain is like Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones. Negative experiences are encoded faster, stored more deeply, and recalled more easily than positive ones. This is called the negativity bias, and it's built into your neurobiology. In practical terms, you can receive 10 compliments and 1 criticism in a single day, and your brain will replay that criticism at 2 in the morning while you're trying to sleep. Sound familiar? Now add culture on top of biology. Most of us grew up hearing things like, don't be selfish, put others first. Humility means thinking less of yourself. These aren't just beliefs. They're neural pathways carved deep through years of repetition. A cross-cultural study published in the Journal of Personality found that people from collectivist cultures showed significantly higher self-criticism and lower self-compassion, not because they were weaker, but because their culture had literally trained their brains to judge themselves more harshly. Here's a story that brings this to life. A woman named Sarah, a nurse, a mother, and a caretaker, came into therapy after a breakdown. She had spent 40 years taking care of everyone around her. For 40 years, she was the one who showed up, the one who held things together when everyone else fell apart. Her children called her when they were scared. Her patients held her hand in their final moments. Her own mother, before she passed, asked for Sarah and only Sarah. And through all of it, Sarah told herself the same quiet thing. Year after year, I'll rest later. Right now, someone needs me. Later never came. One evening after a double shift, she sat alone in her car in the hospital parking lot and realized she couldn't remember the last time she had cried, laughed, or felt anything at all. She just felt empty, hollowed out, like a glass that had been poured from so many times that nothing was left inside it. That was the night everything broke. When her therapist asked, "When do you take care of yourself?" she laughed, as if it were a joke. Then she stopped laughing, because she realized she didn't actually have an answer. Then the therapist said something she never forgot. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and Sarah, your cup has been empty for years. Sarah sat with that sentence in silence. Then, for the first time in longer than she could remember, she cried. Not because she was broken, but because someone had finally named what she'd been carrying alone for 4 decades. Sarah had never considered that taking care of herself was also taking care of others, that her own well-being directly affected the quality of love she could give. That's not selfishness, that's physiology. Now we need to talk about what self-hatred does to your body. Years of research have shown that chronic self-criticism keeps cortisol, your stress hormone, elevated for long periods. Over time, this can damage your memory, weaken your immune system, and increase inflammation throughout the body. That inflammation has been linked to depression, heart disease, and many other long-term health problems. Self-compassion has the opposite effect. Research has shown that practicing self-compassion can improve vagal tone, strengthening the connection between your brain and body, supporting better emotional regulation, heart health, and immune function. Then there's chronic muscle tension. When you carry shame inside you, your body carries it too. The muscles in your shoulders, jaw, and chest stay tight for years, often creating pain with no obvious physical cause. Many people experience crying, trembling, or a feeling of warmth when they first practice genuine self-compassion. That's the body releasing what the mind has been holding on to. Now here's a study that should make you stop and think. Researchers asked participants to place their hands in painfully cold ice water. One group was guided through harsh self-criticism, the other was guided through self-compassion. The self-compassion group reported less emotional suffering, and they kept their hands in the ice water significantly longer. Self-compassion literally increased physical pain tolerance. Here's a simple way to picture everything we've talked about. Imagine you have a bank account. Every promise you keep to yourself is a deposit. Every healthy boundary is a deposit. Every act of courage is a deposit. But every time you betray yourself just to keep someone else happy, it's a withdrawal. Every time you ignore your values, it's another withdrawal. Every time you accept less than what you know is right, it's another withdrawal. Now imagine doing that for years. One day, you wake up emotionally bankrupt, not because life stole everything from you, but because, without realizing it, you kept giving pieces of yourself away. The beautiful thing is, self-love works exactly the same way, only in reverse. You don't rebuild it overnight. You rebuild it one small deposit at a time. One honest conversation, one healthy habit, one promise kept, one boundary protected, one act of self-respect. That's how confidence grows, not in giant leaps, but in quiet moments when nobody is watching. Because every time you choose yourself without hurting anyone else, you're sending your mind one powerful message: I matter too. You probably know Michael Jordan as one of the greatest basketball players of all time. But what made him extraordinary wasn't that he never failed. It was that he refused to let failure define him. The inner critic is not your enemy. Stay with me. It is a part of you that developed in childhood to protect you. When you were small and dependent, fitting in meant survival. Your inner critic learned, if I attack myself before anyone else can, I won't be caught off guard. The problem is, you are no longer a child, but the critic never got the update. Here's what that inner critic sounds like. You're not smart enough for this. Who do you think you are? You'll never be as good as them. You messed up again. Of course you did. Now here's something that changes the way you hear that voice. Instead of saying, I'm so stupid I can't do this, try using your own name. Say, this is hard. What would help you right now? That small shift creates psychological distance from your emotions and helps you respond with greater clarity instead of reacting automatically. There's another powerful technique. Instead of thinking, I am a failure, say, I notice I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. Same thought, completely different relationship to it. Your thoughts are like the weather. You are the sky. The sky doesn't fight the storm, it simply holds it. And every storm eventually passes. Now let's turn all of this into something practical. The first practice is simple. The next time you're struggling, pause and tell yourself, this is a moment of suffering. Suffering is part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment. These few words can help calm your nervous system within minutes. The second practice is body-based self-compassion. Place your hand on your heart. Feel the warmth of your own touch. Take 3 slow, deep breaths. Even gentle touch from yourself can activate your body's caregiving system, helping you feel calmer and more supported. The third practice is called the failure letter. The next time you fail at something, write yourself a letter from the perspective of a wise, compassionate friend who knows all your flaws and still believes in you. Instead of feeding shame, you'll create space for accountability, healing, and growth. The fourth practice is to linger on positive experiences. Every day, when something good happens, even something small, allow yourself to fully experience it for 15 to 30 seconds. Don't rush past it. The brain strengthens whatever it spends time paying attention to. The fifth practice is the mirror exercise. The next time you stand in front of a mirror, don't look at your face first. Look into your own eyes. Then, ask yourself one simple question. Would I want to be friends with someone who treats me the way I treat myself? Don't answer too quickly. Think about it. When you make a mistake, what's the first thing you say to yourself? I'm so stupid. I always mess things up. Why am I like this? Now imagine your best friend made that exact same mistake. Would those be the first words you'd say to them? Probably not. You'd say, it's okay. Everyone makes mistakes. You'll do better next time. So why does compassion come so naturally when it's for someone else, but feel almost impossible when it's directed toward yourself? The discomfort you feel while doing this isn't failure. It's information. It shows you how unfamiliar kindness toward yourself has become. And with practice, that discomfort slowly fades, making room for genuine self-respect. Imagine your best friend comes to you. They're crying. They failed at something that mattered deeply to them. They feel stupid, worthless, like they'll never be enough. What would you say? You wouldn't tell them, you're right, you're a failure, you should have done better. You'd probably say, I'm so sorry, this hurts. You tried so hard. This doesn't define you. You are so much more than this moment. You say those things because you love them. Now here's the most important thing I want you to remember. You deserve that same voice. Not someday. Not when you lose the weight. Not when you get the promotion. Not when you fix the relationship. Not when you finally prove yourself. Now, exactly as you are, with all your failures, all your flaws, and all your unfinished edges. There's a powerful truth that changes everything. You don't accept yourself after you change. You change because you first learn to accept yourself. Self-love is not the reward waiting for you at the finish line. Self-love is the fuel that gets you there. For most of our lives, we believe one lie. When someone finally loves me, I'll finally feel complete. So we spend years searching for the right relationship, the right job, the right amount of money, the right opportunity, the right moment, believing that something outside of us will finally fix what we feel inside. But what if that's the wrong direction? If you don't believe you're worthy of love, what happens when someone genuinely loves you? At first, it feels amazing, but then fear quietly appears. What if they leave? What if they find someone better? What if they discover who I really am? Without even realizing it, you begin sabotaging the very thing you once prayed for, not because the love wasn't real, but because your self-image couldn't hold it. So maybe the person you've been waiting for was never someone else. Maybe you've been waiting for the day you finally decide to stop abandoning yourself. What if, instead of waiting for someone else to tell you you're enough, you started believing it yourself? What if, instead of waiting for someone to rescue you, you became your own rescue? Let me take you back to Sarah for a moment. A year after that night in the parking lot, Sarah did something she hadn't done in decades. She took a Sunday off, not because she had to, because she chose to. She sat in her garden, the one she'd planted years ago and never had time to actually sit in, and she drank her tea slowly while it was still warm, instead of finding it cold and forgotten on the counter hours later like always. Her daughter called that afternoon, worried, the way she used to whenever Sarah didn't answer right away. "Mom, is everything okay?" And Sarah said, "Everything is okay. I'm just sitting here taking care of myself for once." There was a long pause on the line. Then her daughter said quietly, "I'm really glad. Mom, you deserve that." Sarah hung up the phone and sat with that sentence for a long time. You deserve that. 40 years of believing her worth was measured by how much she gave away. And it took one empty Sunday afternoon, sitting in a garden she'd planted for everyone else, and finally sat in for herself, to start believing it might be true. She still struggles some days. The old voice still shows up sometimes, telling her she's being selfish, that she should be doing more for someone else. But now she has an answer for it. I cannot pour from an empty cup. Not anymore. Before you leave, I want to give you one thing to carry with you. Not a quote, not an affirmation, a question. Every morning for the next 7 days, ask yourself, what does someone who truly loves themselves do today? Not someone perfect, not someone fearless, someone who genuinely loves themselves while knowing all of their flaws. What do they eat? How do they talk to themselves after making a mistake? Do they rest without guilt? Do they say no without shame? Do they pursue what lights them up, even when it's scary? Here's something remarkable. You don't have to feel worthy before you start acting worthy. You act worthy first, and eventually, the feeling catches up. Here's what I know about you. Even though we've never met, you watch this far because some part of you is reaching for something better. Some part of you knows you deserve more than the harshness you've been living with. And that part of you is right. You can't always control what happens to you, but you can choose how you respond to it. You survived every hard day that came before this one. You're still here, still learning, still trying. That is not a small thing. That is everything. One day, years from now, you might find yourself sitting somewhere quiet, the way Sarah did. Maybe in a garden. Maybe just at your kitchen table with a cup of something warm. And you'll realize that somewhere along the way, without a single dramatic moment, without anyone clapping or noticing, you stopped being your own worst critic. You became, instead, the friend you always needed. That moment is waiting for you. It doesn't begin with a perfect plan. It begins with one small decision, made quietly, today, that nobody else will ever see. Self-love is not a destination. It's a practice, a choice you make every single day, one breath at a time. And it starts right now. If this message reached you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe someone who, like Sarah, has been pouring from an empty cup for far too long. And if you want to keep exploring the psychology and neuroscience of becoming your best self, stay with us. Because every time you come back, you're choosing to understand yourself a little more. You're choosing growth over shame. You're choosing compassion over condemnation. And most importantly, you're choosing yourself. And that is where everything begins.